The real place to start is before dementia, when the person is either has normal cognition or when they're beginning to have some slippage in what we call mild cognitive impairment. At that point, we have much better opportunities to prevent that person from becoming demented.
Hey, everybody, this is Buck Joffrey with Longevity Roadmap. And today we're going to talk a little bit about cognitive health. Okay. Cognitive health, as you know, is required to do everything that we do. Okay. Whether we're chasing new memories, simply trying to make it through the day without forgetting where we left our keys, it's everything, right? My guest on this week's show is an expert on early screening for cognitive decline. This is an interesting show, which you're going to want to listen to. We discuss, a quick 5-minute check, how it can cut straight into the heart of what's normal versus what deserves a closer look. Those kinds of heads ups can make all the difference, whether you're worried about age-related memory lapses or subtle after effects from concussions. We also talk about prevention, small habits you can start today, brain workouts, things that you can do to optimize the way you age. As always, it's a podcast worth listening to if you care about your cognitive health, and who doesn't? And we will have that discussion for you right after these messages.
Hey, longevity enthusiasts, it's time to take it to the next level. I've been fine-tuning my longevity regimen for years, and I look better and feel better than I did a decade ago. In fact, my blood work is even better than it was back then. And it's all because of my data-driven regimen. And it's inspired me to create a course and community just for you. It's called the Longevity Roadmap, and I urge you to check it out. If you're tired of your belly fat, tired of being tired, or just want to optimize yourself for the next 50 years, visit longevityroadmap.com. That's longevityroadmap.com.
Welcome back to Longevity Roadmap. Today, my guest is Dr. Mitchell Clionsky. He's a board-certified clinical neuropsychologist with over 45 years of experience evaluating and treating patients with cognitive challenges, from dementia and ADHD to traumatic brain injury. He has conducted or supervised more than 25,000 neuropsychological evaluations and continues to see hundreds of patients every year. Alongside his wife and collaborator, Dr. Emily Clionsky, he developed the Memory Orientation Screening Test, or MOST, a groundbreaking tool that's changed the way clinicians detect early cognitive impairment. And together they have co-authored the book Dementia Prevention, Using Your Head to Save Your Brain, which distills decades of research into practical advice, I should say, for protecting your mind as you age. Mitch, welcome to the show.
Buck, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me.
No bad. Let's start with this. You've spent over 4 decades in clinical neuropsychology with 25,000 patients plus, to add to that experience. What initially drew you to this field, and how has your perspective evolved over the years?
I, by nature, am an incredibly curious person. And I found myself being more and more interested, not just how the brain influenced how we behave in a broader sense, what we do and how we make relationships with people, and more so than how we experience emotion. I got really interested in thinking about the questions of how do we learn? How do we stay focused and attentive? How do we hold on to new information in different ways? And more importantly, how can we then use that information and identify it and basically recommend interventions and treatments to physicians and to patients that can make a difference in their lives? So it's driven out of curiosity as much as anything.
Yeah. So for those unfamiliar with your work, maybe you can kind of describe the kinds of patients you typically see, and maybe some of the main cognitive challenges you help address in your practice.
These days, I'm seeing about 90% people who have lived at least 50 years and are worried about how their brains are working. The number one question that they're asking is this what I'm doing normal for someone my age and background, or is it something I should be concerned about? We also see people who have, unfortunately, very little insight, so they don't have any concerns. They're brought in. Why are you here? My wife told me. My doctor referred me. I say, yeah, but what's going on? Nothing. I'm doing fine. And oftentimes those people are actually having more problems than the ones who are concerned about their cognition.
Yeah, interesting. And you, along with your wife, as we mentioned earlier, developed the memory orientation screening test. What is that? What is it used for?
So this is a 5-minute test that was developed based on our files of patients where we've given them 4 different tests of memory and 5 different measures of their attention and another 3 or 4 tests of problem solving and executive functions, tests of language. And we produce these 8-page reports based on 3.5 hours of testing and patient interviews and interviews with their family. And we'd send this off to the neurologist and the primary care doctor, and they'd look at these and say, Mitch, this is really great stuff. We really appreciate it. This is very helpful. I have to confess, I keep flipping to the back page and just reading what your conclusions and recommendations are. But you know what would really help me is if you could come up with something I could do in my office that was better than what I've been using, that would allow me to save all this time and come up with as good an answer or maybe close to that kind of answer. And at first, I was rather, challenged by that in a sort of a negative way, like, hey, you're putting me out of business here, dude. And I thought about it after a while and realized, this isn't such a bad idea, but I don't know if this can be done. Growing up in the field of clinical psychology and learning how to give tests of all these different functions, one of the things we learned early on was that basically the longer the test, the more items you can give, the more stable your results will be, the more accurate they will be. So I had to work against that kind of learning. And what I discovered is if you select the right elements, you could build a mini car essentially from much larger pieces if you just chose the right ones to go into it. And so we scoured the data. One of the things we found out was the test that most of the doctors were using at that time, a measure called the Fulstein Mini Mental State Exam.
Yep.
Probably heard of it because everyone from a certain era, that's what you learned. It came
That's
out
what we learned in med
1975
school.
or so.
Sure. Yeah.
And what happened was that we were getting people who looked perfectly normal on this test and yet had pretty glaring problems on more extensive testing. And I realized that was because there was a lot of fluff in the test, a lot of elements that everyone could get. So it really wasn't discriminating. So we started there and we pared that down. We added some other types of memory tests and measures of what we call executive function. Now, your executive functions are the things which allow you to plan ahead, to be able to solve problems, to be able to work around obstacles, very important functions of the brain. And we found these 4 elements. 2 of them were memory tests. One of them was an orientation test. You know what day it is, what time it is, things like that. And the last one was a clock drawing. And we came up with a very sophisticated scoring system that could be broken down into an 8-point scale. And what we found is that if we could then combine these elements together, it had a very high correlation, very high relationship with the results of the entire test battery in terms of, was this person normal? Were they having mild cognitive problems? Or did that mild cognitive impairment decline into something which we call dementia, progressive neurological disease? And we found that it did really well. And that's what caused us to then take this and figure, well, how do we get it out into the hands of people that they could use it in their offices? And we realized if we put it on an iPad, that we could get something that a nursing assistant could give in your office and that it would give you a really good guide as to how that person was doing. So that's how this whole thing came about.
Yeah. How long does it take now to do one of these tests, the most tests?
5 minutes.
Okay. Well,
And we tested that on literally hundreds of patients in our office. It's 5 minutes. If you have really severe dementia, it'll take a little longer because you have to repeat things. But here's
So,
the cool thing.
mm-hmm.
In June, we're going to be coming out with a home version of this test
Yeah.
so that you don't have to wait until you can get an appointment. You don't have to hope that your doctor's giving you a sensitive test. You're going to be able to answer the question ahead of time, is my thinking normal, by doing something on an iPad, a cell phone, or your own computer in your house. So
Yeah.
that's the next generation for us of what we're going to call the brain doc test, because it sounds more like something somebody would take, frankly, than just the most.
Let me ask you this. In terms of, so we have this test, but I want to talk sort of broader about, normal versus abnormal cognitive decline as we age. Particularly for people who are listening, or very longevity and health conscious. And, you get into your 50s and you're like, gosh, how come I can't remember that now? Like things, what are those types of things normal? What types of things should you not be alarmed about in terms of normal aging process, and what types of things should you be more concerned about in general?
See, and that is the great dilemma, because the overlap between concerning and non-concerning problems is huge. And they've tried coming out with checklists. They had something that was developed called the AD8, Alzheimer's disease, 8 symptoms to be concerned about. The problem is, I would bet that you and I would have at least a couple of them that we would acknowledge.
Yeah.
It still leaves people with this great question, is this normal? And that's the dilemma. Everyone forgets some things, or doesn't remember them accurately, or leaves out pieces of them, or combines memory. Everyone that I know searches for a word at times. And we're in the middle of a sentence and we're just saying, what was that word? And sometimes we can use a substitute, and sometimes we get stuck where somebody fills in the blank for us. Many of times we put down a coffee cup, can't remember where we left it, have to retrace our steps.
Well, just to add a level of complexity to that, like, there are certain things that some people are just have always not been good at, or there's variability even within people as they get older. I mean, for me, for example, I've always been very forgetful in the sense of, like, where did I leave that thing, right? Like, but that's been since I was, as long as I can remember. I was 7 years old losing stuff, and I see it in my kids.
Yes.
Whereas, so it's hard. And another thing is, I did have, and I don't know exactly how this was scored, but I think I had some neuro eval just electively. And I remember one portion of it thinking, oh my God, they're going to think I'm completely demented at this point, because there was a part of it where you were supposed to memorize different kinds of, like, line figure shapes or whatever. And then just, did you see them or not? And I don't know how I scored, but I'm sure I scored very badly on that. But I was thinking to myself, I don't think I would have ever been good at that test, because that's not the way my brain really works. So how do you extricate all that?
Yeah, and those are great questions. And some of that misplacement disorganization actually is a feature of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which we're discovering is a lot more common than we used to think.
Right.
The other thing that people frequently will have trouble with is remembering the names of other folks, especially if they don't see them very frequently.
Yeah.
And fortunately, because I suffer from that as well, I've done some research on it, discovered it is not a sign of incipient dementia, thank goodness. But I have to go through, if I'm going to go someplace and I know...
Well, were you always like that, Mitch?
Yes.
Or is that new? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Always like that.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd never have a career in politics, because you really have to know that stuff. In fact, I used to have a friend who was a lawyer, and he had a job right out of law school, because he went to law school in D.C., and he worked for a lobbyist. At his job, he kept this book with pictures and details of all of the people in Congress. And his job was to stand next to the lobbyist to go down and say, okay, that's Senator X, Y, and Z. His wife's name is Judy. He's got 3 kids. They got to be in their teenage years right now, and they're really into horses. So the lobbyist could then go up and say, hey, Senator, how's the wife and how's the 3 kids? And, well, that's horses. They must be doing great. So that was his job, because this is a common thing. But for that lobbyist, that was a real impediment.
Yeah.
I, however, can remember histories really well. So if someone, get a colleague calling up and saying, hey, did you see so-and-so, Bob Smith, last week? What'd you think of him? I said, something, I really don't know. Tell me something about him.
Yeah.
Oh, he's the architect. Oh, of course. So
Right.
then it all comes back. It depends how we
Some of
store
it's
things
paying
differently.
attention, I feel like, too. Like, when I'm very guilty of, like, when somebody introduces me, I'm focusing on the handshake and the eye contact, and I don't. And if you ask me that person's name like 5 seconds later, I probably didn't even listen to it the first time.
And that's
So
very normal. And often you're also, in many cases, worried about how you're coming across and what they're going to think of you and what you wanted
Right.
to tell them. So you don't really process that.
Yeah.
It's a learned skill. There are techniques that you can do. It won't improve your brain, but it'll make you better at cocktail parties.
Yeah. So you've talked a little bit about normal, abnormal. There's certain things I want to get into as well, including, like, you've worked with the NFL, the National Football League, concussion settlement program. What have you learned about the long-term cognitive effects of traumatic brain injury from, these kind of sports, and kind of any sort of broader insights from your work?
Well,
That
I was one of the many evaluators who they saw as part of the concussion settlement program. And I didn't do very many evaluations because, to be perfectly blunt, I thought that they had set standards that really weren't easily met by legitimate people who had disabilities. And I thought that it was a poorly effected program. So I didn't like it very much, but I do believe in my research, in terms of reading about and dealing with. I was also the sports concussion expert for University of Massachusetts sports for a year, where I really did see some of their hockey players and their football players. But I do believe in chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. I do believe that people develop injuries which may be as much from practice as it is from the actual games, and that as we get older and we lose our cognitive reserve, we lose our bench strength. Essentially, we don't have the reserves to put in when the first string gets tired, cognitively, that those problems become more evident, and you get a higher rate of dementia, a higher rate of cognitive impairment in general from people who have done those things. Just in the same way, if you're an athlete growing up, chances are you're going to be looking for knee replacements or something in your 60s, whereas somebody who was more of a couch potato has fresher parts.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've obviously seen a number of these patients, and you've diagnosed them, and we're kind of lumping a lot of these together, so we can certainly, kind of pull them apart. But when you think about, like, Alzheimer's disease, and maybe specifically, we're talking about traumatic brain injuries and stuff like that. Have you seen any particular interventions that, you think are very useful, promising for either one of these diseases? And just for context, it's on my mind also because I recently had the opportunity to interview Dr. Dean Ornish. I don't know if you know Dr. Ornish's work is on Alzheimer's disease, but basically it's showing some pretty incredible work just in terms of reversal of, certainly in early Alzheimer's, up to 70% just based on basic things like diet and exercise, meditation, that kind of thing. Are you seeing anything that kind of makes you feel like, yeah, there's some things you can really do to reverse this stuff, or at least keep it from getting worse?
Well, my belief is that by the time someone's diagnosed, we have limited our options for reversing things. Now, not to say that we cannot affect at least stability and perhaps some improvement by finding and reversing some of the contributing medical problems. But the real place to start is before dementia, when the person is either has normal cognition or when they're beginning to have some slippage in what we call mild cognitive impairment. At that point, we have much better opportunities to prevent that person from becoming demented. The research shows now very reliably across a multitude of different research groups, the biggest one being the Lancet Commission in Great Britain, who in 2017, 2020, and 2024 all published large-scale updates of studies showing first that 40%, then 42%, and most recently this year, 49% of all-cause dementia is preventable. There was a group in the United States that took the Lancet factors, added a few to them, and came up using the United States Health and Retirement Survey data that 62% could be prevented. 3 days ago, this paper came out of the Harvard group that found that 60% of strokes, 40% of dementia, and 35% of recurrent depression in late life could be prevented. So it's not just my opinion. This is far smarter people than I who have looked at this research. The key to looking is several things. Number one, you have to look real broadly. Number one, you have to recognize dementia is not Alzheimer's equals dementia. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. It's an important type, but it's not equivalent to. You have to also look at vascular dementia. You have to also look at the traumatic encephalopathies, alcohol abuse, Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia, and a bunch of other smaller subtypes. Probably the one that's the oddball is frontotemporal dementia. That's really different in a lot of ways. So number one, you have to recognize it's more than one thing, which is why one intervention will not probably be the solution. The second thing is you have to really look at a very wide swath of literature, cardiology, because a lot of this has to do with how your circulation's working. You have to look at endocrinology because of diabetes and the effects of blood sugar on brain function. You have to look at sleep medicine. One of the things that we talk about in our book that is really, I think, the secret sauce in many of these that is overlooked by many of the primary groups is the effect of sleep disordered breathing.
Sure. Yeah.
If you're not getting
absolutely.
enough oxygen to your brain is not working properly.
Yeah.
And you can fix that in many cases with interventions. You have to look at exercise physiology, neurology, psychiatry, a whole bunch of things in order to get the full picture. And that's really important. Getting back to your question about Ornish. So his group that he shows this improvement, it's a very motivated group. If I understand his research correctly, they've got like support group meetings like 3 times a week. They've made radical changes in their diet and radical changes in their exercise. I think that's great. But I tell you, I have a hard enough time getting my patients to make even medium kind of changes in any one of those functions, and we don't have the support features. So that's in the ideal world. From a practical level, we have to look at other things. And also, we're not sure which is the primary reason that his people, is it the combination or is it the group solidarity? Is it the diet change? Is it their exercise? I don't know which is which.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, obviously he's had quite a bit of success with cardiovascular disease with similar protocols. So, part of it does seem like there's something related to the cardiovascular system there, and physiologically, and you would think that would probably be most likely due to the diet and exercise, but who knows? Mm-hmm. Just in terms of other types of things that people do, especially like in this longevity space, just your thoughts on, I know like there's a guy in town here who's a neurologist who he does EEGs and tries to figure out when parts of the brain may be not firing as enough power, enough energy, and he does various stimulation protocols. Is there any research on that to suggest that that stuff would actually work to potentially, towards prevention?
I have not seen it if it exists, and I've
Mm-hmm.
not seen it replicated if it exists. There's a
Yeah.
lot of small scale studies
Yeah.
that get published that usually make headlines on Yahoo or Google or MSN, whatever it is, that sound like, oh, here's something that could really reverse Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And they will publish those studies, and I keep waiting for the replication. I
Sure.
keep waiting for some way of tying this in that I could feel good about, whether it's neurofeedback or brain training or any of those kinds of things. And when you start getting into diet and you start getting into supplements, it's Wild West out there. I really don't look at very much of that as something that's helpful for most people.
Yeah.
And my
Now,
feeling
when
about
you,
longevity is it's wonderful to live longer, but I want to be thinking the entire time that I'm
yeah,
living.
right, exactly. Yeah, obviously the traumatic brain injury is a different animal altogether. People talk about various interventions there. The one that comes to mind is hyperbaric oxygen. What are your thoughts on hyperbaric oxygen for traumatic brain injury or for any kind of brain health?
There's some weak evidence. There are some potential pitfalls to using it. We've been sort of interested also in its role potentially in vision loss, because a lot of vision loss is related to oxygen decrements, where they have macular degeneration.
Mm-hmm.
It's oftentimes caused by lack of oxygen. There's some suggestion glaucoma is also related as the pathway to this. I find that, again, I'm back to how are you breathing while you're sleeping,
Yeah.
rather than trying to find a treatment that is going to somehow increase the amount of oxygen and looking at its rebound to try to stimulate nerve growth, neurogenesis in those areas. I think it's interesting. I really wish that it was more well researched. I think it's not ready for prime time primarily.
What do you see the role of technology in the future of this kind of stuff? I mean, certainly I've got to think, digital cognitive assessments, artificial intelligence. I mean, there's got to be lots of stuff that you're probably thinking about with all of this technology at your fingertips now.
So that's why we are launching at this point this test at home, because we've got a person that you see on the screen who we've named Vita, Virtual Testing Assistant. So she's able to
Interesting.
actually give a very good version of this test that you can then respond to by speaking, and the intelligence will translate your voice into text, which can then be scored. And she can then give prompts when you get off track or ask the next question or present all the information. So we're very much in favor of that kind of a controlled. I even hesitate to call it artificial intelligence, because it's sort of artificial intelligence in handcuffs. We do not want Vita answering questions. In fact, what we say is, she goes on to say, just like any assistant in a lab or in a doctor's office, I'm not allowed to answer questions.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to record your responses and score them. So that's what's allowed us to then take this leap where you don't need to be in a doctor's office, where you have a medical assistant giving you the test in order to get a highly reliable, accurate assessment at home. I think there's going to be more of this. I think that it's going to change the entire way in which neuropsychology is practiced, so that it'll help to unblock what for many people is a 6-month waiting list. I don't quite understand why it takes so long. We see people in my office typically within 2 to 3 weeks of referral, and we see about 800 cases a year. So it's not that we're only seeing, 2 cases a week, which is why we get people in so quickly. We're seeing 15 to 18 new patients every week. And that's just me and 3 testing assistants. My postdocs have all graduated at this point. For whatever reason, neuropsychologist has become a very inefficient system, so that you try to get an appointment and you're looking now, oh, well, we can see you in 5 months unless we get someone canceling. This is going to unblock that. We're going to be able to move up those timelines if this kind of technology is applied more generally.
Yeah. Is the most questionnaire, is that already available for doctors' offices?
So here's this history of that. We made it available. We at one point marketed it in conjunction with a company called Lincare, which is a medical gas company. They do oxygen in the home. They do CPAP. We then were approached by Quest Diagnostics. They wanted to buy the rights for everything other than that specific use, which we, in fact, had a deal with them. They renamed the test Cognizance, and they published it on their platform. What happened then was, for 5 years, they were exclusive distributor. Apple made some changes in the technology that they would allow. So we weren't using it on our own at that point. About a year ago, we reacquired the rights to this. But at this point, we said, rather than first approaching the medical market, let's go to the home market, and then we'll end it with doctors. So after this version goes out in June to the home market, within the next 6 months after that, we're going to have a version which doctors are going to be able to use in their office.
Well, where's the home one available now?
It is not. June.
June, right.
June. We'll have beta
so in a month or
version
so,
in May.
how do you
I'll
get
be
that?
happy to send you access to.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. How do you, but for most people, like when June, rolls around, like how June of 25 rolls around, how would they get access to something like that?
Well, they can do this by going to our website called braindoc.com. That's the number one way. But we're also going to be doing some marketing through TikTok and Instagram and
Sure.
all the different social platforms. We have a campaign that we're putting together. We're probably also going to crowd fund it so that people can buy an advance copy of it for half price.
Sure.
So that they can have first dibs on the test. So as they say, stay tuned.
Yeah, and I assume if you go to BrainDoc, you said braindoc.com? Is that right?
Braindoc.com.
Uh-huh. And I assume you can get on some kind of a list for, updates and that kind of thing, right?
There'll be a link to it when it's published. Right now, we're really still in development for this. We've got it all wireframed. In fact, about an hour before I was on with you, I was on a Zoom meeting with the developers. And so we're on schedule for this. In a month, we're going to have the beta version.
Got it. Mitch, thanks so much for being on the show today. Really do appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening. A quick reminder that while I am, in fact, a surgeon, nothing I say should be construed as medical advice. Now, make sure to include your physician in any medical decisions you make. And also, if you're enjoying the show, please make sure to show your support with a like, share, or subscribe.